Okay, let's get started with this next module. This is module 3 out of our Microsoft Project 2010 Fundamentals book. A couple things we're going to do here. We're going to enter a couple tasks, talk through the new task mode, and also enter in some durations, and also work with a recurring task if you haven't done that before. So the first thing we're going to do is just simply work from a blank project. If you don't have one already open, just simply do File and New and work off of a blank project. Otherwise, just get started with a new one. The very first thing let's take a look at is the around the properties. So this is moved in Project 2010. If you haven't already seen this, if I go into File, where we're going to go is into what's known as the backstage. So from File we go into Info, and then from here you'll notice that you have quite a few different options around setting up the project server accounts, organizing templates, for example, that we can get to. Now, where they've essentially have placed what we normally would find under tools and options is under project information. Before it was file and properties to get to the properties area, or tools and options in project 2007. In this case, we're going into the advanced properties under project information on the right hand side, and what this is going to do is bring us into the properties of this particular file. This is important because quite often you're going to want to change the title, which will also have an impact on your project summary task. So in this particular case, I'm just going to type something in here, software development, and then I would come in here and type in author, subject manager, company name. Just drop MPP in here like this. Just tab through, and then when you're done with that, go ahead and click OK here, and you basically have updated the properties around this particular file. And then in order for me to navigate back to the task area, I just simply click on tasks here. So those of you who've been working with Project 2010 for a while, you have noticed the task mode. Those of you who are relatively new to Project 2010 will then see this new column that emerges. When I click in a task, for example, I'm just going to type in summary here just to get some tasks out there, and I hit the enter key, you'll notice that there's a task mode option. If I go back to that and I simply click on this, you'll notice that I can change that from either manual or auto in terms of the essentially the mode I'm going to use from a scheduling perspective. Now what that allows me to do when I'm in this particular mode, if I go into duration, for example, I can type anything in here. I can type, I think it's going to be a week, and then hit the enter key. And I'll just drag the split bar over, and what you'll notice is that when I type that in there, it's putting it in there, and it's italics. It is basically taking what I've placed in there. Now if I change that task mode, it's going to override this, and it's going to go back to the way you're accustomed to working with Project in the earlier versions, which is the auto mode, where it's going to place both the duration and the start and the finish dates in here. You're noticing that also it's not plugging anything in the start or the finish like it traditionally would do in earlier versions. Also, if I bring my split bar back over, that there's nothing in the timeline either. Okay, so if I change that, if I change this to auto, you'll notice how it overrides it. Now if I want to do that across multiple tasks where I want to override, right, then I can come in here and I can use the autofill and pull it down like that, and then I could start to indent these as well to get those in there. So that's a little bit on the task mode. Really the idea behind the manual mode is to make it a little bit easier, particularly for project managers that are just getting accustomed to the tool, where it looks and feels much more like much more like Excel. It allows them to just simply type in some task names, maybe a little note there for duration or for the dates, and then as they work with the tool and it starts to the tool starts to evolve a little bit, or the project rather, then they can start to maybe manipulate some of it back into the auto mode. The other thing we want to do here is let's put a milestone. Milestones are going to be placed in the same way, so I can basically set the 0 duration here for the milestone. Notice how it indicates it in the timeline, but because we do have it set to manual as opposed to automatic, it's not until I set that to auto does it actually convert it back to auto as such. Okay, so that's a little bit on the task mode settings that we have. The other thing we want to cover here is inserting a recurring task. So this is going to be very much like you may have done in previous versions in terms of the ability to insert recurring tasks. In 2010 they've moved it in terms of the way you handle a recurring task. The first thing I'm going to do is basically get my insertion point at the point at which I want to place the recurring task, and what you'll notice under task is the recurring task option. So you want to first make sure that you're in the task tab, and then you want to go find the task button and then click on recurring task. Now when I click on recurring task, what it's going to do is give me a dialog box, and this is the same dialog box that I would be working with in 2007, so there's no real changes there. And in this case I'm just going to type in scope meeting, and then I'm going to go across and set the duration. So in this case you would do something, normally we like to use days for duration, but in this case it's a meeting, it's a 1-hour meeting, so I'm going to place it to 1 H here, weekly, set it to Friday, then determine a start date in by a certain time frame, or perhaps over a certain number of occurrences. It's really up to you at this point. I may push this forward a little bit. I have a sense that this is going to be a project that's going to maybe take close to a month to complete. I can always go back in and change this. Notice also that there are some calendar settings that you can have in this dialog box related to whether or not it's going to adhere to certain calendar limitations, and you can set those down here. So scheduling ignores resource calendars, for example, very much like you see in at the task level. So I basically placed it in there, but notice that there is still this empty row here. So technically I did not have to insert a blank row in order to insert a task, but I do need to be sensitive to what I have selected when I insert it. So basically your takeaway from that is it's going to insert above whatever you have selected. So I didn't need to have that empty one in there because it wasn't going to override the existing task, it was simply going to place it above it. And I can move this guy around. If I wanted to place this at the beginning, I could certainly do that. If I expand it out, it's going to show me every instance of the task. Now I can go into each of these individually and it will take me into the details of the task, or I can go into the actual recurring task option, which will then bring me back here to the task information dialog box, and I could even potentially pull this back one, and then it's going to essentially remove that one. So I want to manage my recurring tasks really from this particular area. Okay, hopefully that was helpful, and we look forward to seeing you in a future module.